Yes. Well, afternoon. I don't have any slides for you. I just have some thoughts from 6 or 7 cities that we visited and my experience in education in general and my concern for the child. So I don't like to talk about statistics because you overlook the real element that teachers care about and parents care about is the education of the child. So you get lost in the data and forget that you're talking about a child and the future of that child. So NAACP commissioned a study because the California State Conference, which I'm president of, took a resolution to the convention calling for a moratorium on charter schools. And all hell broke loose from the charter school industry, which shocked us. And being what we are in the NAACP, they commissioned a task force, and they decided to punish me and make me chair the task force since the resolution had come from California. And to their surprise, we operationalized the task force. We got enough money and enough resources to go across the country and hold hearings in cities and find out on the ground what's really going on charter schools. We had to change from a moratorium on charter schools because our good president got elected and the secretary who went into education posed a bigger threat than just charter schools. So we had to look at quality education in schools. And so we changed our focus a little bit, but we got back to the same concern as we went across and had these hearings. I just want to talk briefly about education in America because we seem to have forgotten that since Jefferson started it, they were just trying to have a good family and good church members. And then it moved to a model like, let's educate these people so they're good public citizens. And before we had Brown v. Board, which was the law that the NAACP carried, we had one of the best public school systems in the world. It was just that the African Americans were not a part of the main public school system. We were separated off in the separate but so-called equal schools. And so I'm just bringing you back here because I want you to see where the problem has been. When it started with profiteering, it also started because we underestimated the level of racism in America. And once Brown v. Board passed and you were supposed to integrate the schools, then this backlash started. It started with I think we made a mistake doing busing because we who were advocating for equity figured the best thing to do, the quickest thing to do was to bus our kids. And I think that was a big mistake in the movement because it created more acrimony and more discord with parents and advocates for equity. And so we had then the beginning of the suburbs, and we had vouchers, and we had tuition tax credits, and we had all those things that some people who resented, they weren't like the people in the South who just tried to block the door. They said, no, we'll try these other little things to see if we can avoid this integration that's going on. And so the whole movement that allowed charter schools to emerge, I think Al Shanker, when he had his idea of innovation, none of that's been realized. I'm just going to tell you now, you can't tell me a charter school that has come back to a regular school and said, now here's what we've learned, and here's what you should be doing in your regular school. Well, that was Al Shanker's desire, but unfortunately, he could not see the end product of profiteers being able to manipulate his dream. And so it was never carried out the way Al Shanker intended for it to be carried out. We never got to that part of it. And so here, education across the country had the largest budget in the world. In every district, maybe a few exceptions, maybe Mississippi and other places, but in most progressive states, education was the largest pot of money. And those who believed in privatization had their eyes on that pot of money. They tried everything they could to get the money. Now, the one group that they disliked more than they did African Americans were unions. I don't want the labor to think that they don't have a piece of this pie, because the people who wanted the money to go into the private sector couldn't get around labor, because labor was the big muscle that kept the public school budget together. So So you had two forces. You had the privatization people. You had the other folks who wanted quality education for their children. You had people who were afraid of integration. And so you had this mixture of stuff happening in America and everybody looking for solutions. So the people went to the suburbs, and the privatization people started chipping away. They first got Polly Williams in Milwaukee to try vouchers, and we all just wanted to hang her up against the thing and stone her because we had blocked vouchers everywhere. Blocked them in California, blocked them all around. But Polly Williams decided in Milwaukee that black kids needed choice. This word choice is really the issue. Everybody thinks that choice is where we should be. You can't find any white. I get angry with my unions because they're now afraid to say that choice is bad. But in the old days, before we allowed, I have to go full disclosure. I worked for the teachers union for 13 years in California. I worked for the CTA. And when Al Shanker first uttered those words, we quivered in California. And then little by little, they put pressure on it. Let's just try it. Let's just try 1 or 2 charter schools. And I always believe a nose under the tent is the beginning of the end. Because first they had like 10 or 12 charter schools, 20 charter schools just for experimentation. And every year they expanded them and they expanded them and expanded them. I don't believe the two systems are compatible. First of all, the charter schools, that what I found, they don't have to have certificated teachers. They don't have to have people who have methodology and pedagogy and can really teach. Now, public schools had its problems and has its problems. But to hear that they are now the last, how did you say that? The last place of resort, I think you said.
If a charter school closes.
Yeah. That wasn't what our public schools ever started out to be. They started out to be places where we had an educated citizenry, where we had people who had pride in America, where we instilled and cultivated American values, and where we took pride in our public schools. Never thought to be a last place of resort for charter schools that really are not regulated. They're not regulated. They don't have to have certificated teachers. They have these private managers who obviously creaming off public school money. They're getting many of our buildings for free because, as you heard, to have these empty buildings and have them as a burden on the district is a problem. And so they're looking for all kinds of ways they can to make this system work. Well, what should make the system work is to just regulate the charter schools. See, the genie is out the bottle. It's too many of them now. You can't just say, like I wanted to say, let's get rid of these charter schools. Not only that, teachers unions have now started organizing charter schools. That hurt my heart because I thought I had an ace in the hole with labor, that they would go to the mat. Let's get rid of these charter schools. Now they have members in some of these charter schools, so they can't come out and say, let's kill them like I could. But I find out that that's a ridiculous position to take. When the large numbers of students in charter schools now, the parents believe that they should have choice. Now, they aren't sure of what kind of choice they're getting, but they just want choice. And if you were a parent in an urban area, African American, Latino, poor white, and people like myself over the years, I'm going to take credit for it, has just beat public education. It's horrible. We need to do something about it. We didn't say the suburban education is great and it's just in these hardcore areas in the inner city. We built an environment where the privateers could come in and say, we can do it better. And so that was also a part of what allowed this movement to take hold the way it has. So we should have been more discriminating. We should not have bussed our kids out to where they weren't wanted. It was hardship on them as well as on the school systems. We should have insisted that Brown v. Board give us what we started out to get was equity. Because it doesn't mean that your child sitting beside a white kid is going to learn more. May learn less, depending on how hostile the environment is. We had Serrano priests. We had all kinds of things to try to get funding equal in our school systems. But what we didn't have was labor, who said, we are going to put our best teachers where they're needed the most. And I don't blame labor because, after all, you are there to protect your members. But had we been able to get the best teachers in the inner city where they were needed the most, right now, I have a nephew who teaches in Sacramento in the urban. Those suburban districts come after him every year. He's a good counselor. He's a good operator. They want to pay him $10,000, $12,000 more. He comes to me every year and he says, Auntie, what should I do? Well, he knows what I'm going to tell him to do. But then now, no, he's got 2 kids now, so I'm not sure I'll be able to tell him that anymore because they're offering more money, they're offering more resources. They're doing everything to attract kids from the urban areas. We need the opposite. We need to find a solution where we attract the best teachers. I don't like Teach for America. I'm just going to tell you, hopefully I'm with friends. If you don't like what I'm saying, that's okay. I'm going to California. I think that's a nice little program, but they rotate them in. They don't have the experience, and they put them mostly in the inner city. And so that's where we need the teacher who's teaching. My suburb wouldn't mean anything, but the teacher who has the best teaching reputation, best skills, to come to where they're needed the most. And I don't necessarily put race on that, because I have lived long enough to know that a bad teacher is a bad teacher regardless of her color or his color. And it's about having a quality teacher. Yes, I'd like to have more people look like me teach in the inner city. But I can tell you, I have seen people that didn't look like me teach in the inner city that got the job done. And got it done better than people that look like me. And so I now advocate for a quality teacher. The crux of the problem, as I see it, is to have labor decide that they're going to take over these inner city schools. No. I think we should regulate all the charter schools. We should make them all public schools. They're not public schools. They're quasi. They're a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but they can do whatever they want. I know in one school they put the bright kids off for a couple of weeks while they work with the children that need more assistance. That would never happen in a public school. The thing about a traditional public school is that we regulated it. Even though we had the ups and the downs, we had a right to go in there and scream and protest and do whatever we could to make them function better. You don't have that right now in a charter school. And so you got a hodgepodge of education going on. I defy anyone to tell me that every child is getting a quality education. So I think that's a lawsuit in the making. We had our law that says every child in America is supposed to have the opportunity of a quality education. Charter schools are defined at law. There is no way that they all have a chance for a quality education. There's no way that the privateers should be able to profit off the back of our children going into public schools. That money should remain in the public schools. You wouldn't have to do your research, and you wouldn't have to do yours if your research was on how to make the public traditional schools better instead of trying to figure out how to make these 2 systems that we never needed in the first place better. That's a ludicrous proposition, that you're going to make 2 systems. You can't make them equal because they were founded on not being equal. One was founded on, let's let them have freedom and flexibility because the union won't let us do it. Let's let them have chances to innovate because labor is too tough. Let's let them have, labor will count the minutes. Labor will do this and do that to protect the teachers. Let's let these schools have flexibility. Well, I bet if Al Shanker was here today, he would be turning over in his grave right now, because this is not what anybody envisioned with charter schools. And so I don't want to be contrary up here. I'm trying to be nice. And I don't want to act like all charter schools are bad. We know that's not a fact. And I don't want to act like all traditional schools are great. We know that's not a fact. But I do think that if you're going to use public money, and you're going to do something with public money, it ought to be done in the public arena. And it ought to be done in the traditional public schools. And maybe we could take that money and create neighborhood schools again. You know what's wrong with charter schools? They'll take one kid over here in the neighborhood and won't take the other in the same household and put one on the bus and leave one behind. That's why the expansion in Boston didn't work, is because finally the citizens rose up and say, no, we can't have this expansion going on. It hurts our kids, it hurts our neighborhoods. And so while charter schools might help a few individuals, I'm an old civil rights worker. I'm a person who believes that we should be advocating for every child and not for a few children. I don't believe, we had 2 systems. If a parent wants to take his or her child to a private school, they could already do that. We had private schools. We still have private schools. Why would we want to take public money and make a quasi-private something out of it when we already had a private school? My upper class friends just send their kids to the best private schools. They don't even send them to charter schools. And so I think it's a mistake to go down this road. I would like to see all charter schools converted, transparency, accountability, certificated teachers, and have their finances regulated like all other schools. And when we do that, then we have one school system again. It'll be called public education. Thank you.
Thank you very much.